Hi guys, it's Ross from Shades Chaos Games again, and today I'm going to talk about airbrushes. So, I've got two airbrushes here. This one I would recommend as a starter's airbrush. So this is the Iwata Neo. So you can pick one of these up new for about £75, somewhere along that kind of price bracket, or you can pick one of these bad boys up, still the Iwata range, but it's the Eclipse. So this one's a bit more professional. It is quite a bit more expensive. I mean, you're looking at least £100 more, depends where you get it from. But you know, this is perfectly acceptable for starters. I wouldn't really recommend like a cheap knockoff, a £20 something. You know, it will lay paint down. Certainly not for miniatures, it wouldn't be very clear. It's okay for scenery. You know, that's purely for speed. But, you know, they won't last very long. The needles will stay sharp. It will just fall to bits. Materials, you know, they're not as good as quality as this. I mean, it's not stainless by any stretch of the imagination. They will gum up, they will jam up really easy. Not to say that airbrushes will never block, because, you know, they will. All airbrushes will block. I mean, skill of an airbrush, I would say 80% of the skill is probably in the cleaning. And it's just experience. Just keep using it and using it and using it. So, I mean, this one is really nice, really smooth. But the airbrushes I would recommend is gravity fed, i.e. it has a bowl on the top, like so. You know, you put your mix in there, your paint, whatever you want to use. It's going to go in there. And it's gravity fed, i.e. it will drop down into the channel where the airline comes through the Venturi and spray out. You know, you can get the ones, the pots underneath, that will suck up. In my opinion, it's wasting a lot of paint. I mean, I'm a mechanic, and that's the kind of airbrushes we use to spray cars. You know, you're mixing up a bowl. In our hobby, the paint goes off really fast, really quickly, so you just be wasting a lot of paint. At least with this, you can see what's going on straight away, straight in there, not a problem. Now, like I said, with airbrushing, the skill in it, yes, it does take a lot of skill for airbrushing, but a lot of it is down to cleaning and knowing the signs. So, like, for example, if you're spraying and you're looking at your bowl and you see bubbles while you're spraying, then you've got a seal gone. So where you've stripped it down and cleaned it, you've put the wrong chemical through it, something a bit too harsh, and it's dried the seal out and it's cracked, for example. So it's knowing your signs. Like, if you're not spraying at all when you're pulling the trigger back, then you know there's definitely a blockage. And most of your blockages do not come from the bottom of the bowl, because you can see how big that hole is there. It actually comes from your nozzle. It's a tiny little jet. So this is the kind of style airbrush you go for. I mean, there's loads of different makes and models out there. I mean, you've got your Badger and loads of airbrushes out there. But this is a 2-action airbrush. So you push down for your air, and you pull back for your paint. Now, you don't go back straight away, you know, gradual. The more you use it, you know, the more you get to feel for how much paint's going to come out. And they're all different. You know, some might not be so responsive as others. Here I can feel straight away that spring is trying to kick in as soon as I try moving it. It's the same with this bad boy here. Now, by feel, there's not much difference in it. I mean, this one feels possibly a little bit more substantial. But, you know, you won't really feel it until the paint's flowing. And when it comes to painting with your airbrush, you need to know what kind of pressures you want to use. And that is also down to you, whatever you feel is comfortable. Now, I personally like to, when I'm spraying models, somewhere between, I don't know, maybe 12... nearly 20 psi for miniatures. I mean, it depends how fine and how gentle. I mean, if you're blasting a miniature in the face, giggity, then you probably wouldn't want to go very high with the airbrush pressure. But when it comes to just blasting pieces of terrain, it doesn't really matter, you know, something like this. It's for the tabletop, you know, it's going to be grubby, it's going to be grimy, you know. I would say maybe knock it up to 30, possibly. Rip through some buildings in no time, you know, loads of scenery, not a problem. Yeah, that's the basics so far. Now I'll get into stripping of the airbrushes. Okay, so as this is a bit of a beginner's guide, I will put away the more professional one and we'll start stripping this one here. So this is the Neo. So that was the main guard for the back of the needle. So without that, if you drop this, you could bend the needle, and needle is the bit that does most of the work. So this one here, the bowl can unscrew. Not every airbrush the bowl unscrews. So you can see in there, it's slightly easier. I'll zoom in for you guys. It's a bit easier, isn't it? And you can unscrew the shroud. Now this protects the needle itself. So if you see there carefully, you can see that little needle in there. I'll bring it up nice and clear. So the needle there, that's in, that's out. That's the bit that does all the work. So without the shroud, if you drop that now, as you can see, that's very, very fine. That will bend and it'll really mess up your spraying days. So you want to protect that as much as possible. So we'll leave the shroud on all the time. Now if you want to spray scenery and you don't care about the cone of the spray, you can leave it off. If you're absolutely confident that you will not drop it, bend it, break it. So after that we have the main jet itself. So this is the venturi. This is the bit you want to keep clean. Inside there, any flakes of paint, rather than smooth paint, they get in there between the cone of this section and the cone of inside there. Will cause your spray to go off to one side, cause it to block completely. You know, bad times. So you want to keep that as clean as possible at all times. Now you can use cotton wool buds. You can use anything that's not abrasive. I quite like the old TP, the soft toothpicks that you can get, little bristly ones. So will not do any damage, obviously, because you use it in your mouth and you don't want to hurt your gums or anything. So that is fantastic for these. I'll go grab one in a minute and show you guys. And this is the main body of the airbrush. So on the back here, you can unscrew that knurled nut. So it should never be any tighter than hand tight. No point in taking it right off, you end up losing it. And you pull the needle right out. So you can see this needle is pretty clean. And you can see how delicate it is. So my hand in the background. That's how fine a point it is. So this needs to be clean at all times. Now when you're cleaning your airbrush, you will have to strip it down this much. You know, I mean, you can have a look at the end of the shroud to see if there's any gunk on the end of the needle, because you can imagine the air is spraying through it all the time when you operate it. And the cone of paint and air, you know, around the tip of the needle can cause blockages as the paint dries. So if you take it out, clean it up, we'll just have a look, see what's going on. So this is about the extent you need to clean it. I don't know, I would say every like 10 hours of spraying, I generally strip it down to about this stage. Make sure that needle's nice and clean. Obviously always make sure the bowl's clean. If you're going to mix paint to pour in, I would always suggest mix it in a small pot, like a little shot pot. Not that I want to do shots in that one anymore. A little shot pot, and pour it in here into the bowl, to this section. I mean, you can mix it in here, but you can never guarantee. You know, you might put too much water in it, might put too much paint in it, and you have to add the other to compensate. So it's always nice to get the nice mixture in a little pot before we pour it in. And now this section here, the pullback lever will now pull out. So this is the bit when you push down, we'll push on a tiny little needle inside here and allow the air to creep in. So make sure the ball's nice and smooth, no flakes of paint on there. So everything you're seeing right now should be always free from paint if you can help it. So now you unscrew the spring area. Oh, that's the knurled bit that I said to keep so you don't lose. Now I like to do this over newspaper or something. I mean, some people do it over a drain. That's great, you know, if you've got a strainer, because you don't want to lose any of these pieces. So in here we have a screw that will keep pressure on the spring at all times. And when you pull back on the trigger, this is the bit that pushes against. So the screwed section, imagine that's where my finger is right now, it's holding that there, so then you're pushing against it. Without that screwed in, you're just pushing it out the back of the gun. And this little boy here, this rests against the button itself, pushing constantly all the time. So returning. If it doesn't return, probably got paint in there somehow, blowing it back through, gets jammed in there. So now you have the main chamber itself, so very large chamber in there, which houses all that springy mechanics. So that always should be free of paint. You probably can't see right in there, but that's the little needle for the air to enter. So I'll unscrew that if I can. So that's it. So that's where the ball was sitting and pushes and allows air to enter. So everything should operate nice and freely. Make sure your little rubber seals aren't split. Very cool. So I'll bung that back in there so I don't lose it for a second. And the most fiddly bit of this particular airbrush, I find, is this little brass piece here. Now, rarely should you need to remove that. You can see that little red section, that's a little red rubber seal. So don't lose that. This piece here, like I said, I use a little TP that I use to clean my teeth. Not the same one, obviously. To clear this little nozzle out. So that bad boy there, that's where your needle sit inside. So obviously this is not how it assembles, but I was just going to show you guys. So that's where your needle goes through. There shouldn't be any blockages there. So you see at the moment there's a little bit of moisture there where I've cleaned the airbrush recently. So that needle should be sticking out about that much. If it's sticking out about half the way or whatever, you've got a blockage. That should be nice and free and poking out nearly the length of the conical piece of the brass edging. Right, so that's stripping it down. Now the next most important bit is remembering how the hell it all goes back together. So it doesn't matter what order you do it in really, you can do the front or the rear. I'm going to stick the front back together. Conical piece there. Shroud there. So always making sure it's free of paint inside there. Lovely. The bowl. Now I'm going to do the rear section. So this piece here slides in like so. And this is the section that screws it into place. I mean, don't be afraid of airbrush, strip it down, be familiar with it. I mean, you shouldn't have to strip it down this much to clean it on a regular basis. Oh, before I put the needle in, I did actually forget this. So when this one goes in, obviously I can't just plonk in there because the seat, this piece here, is pushing against, well it should be, because the spring's there. So if you just pull it back a little bit, and then drop the button in place, So you should see that the little seat is behind the button to push it back at all times. So basically the seat is supporting the whole length of the button. Without it, it'd just be being pushed, granted, via this, but quite floppy. So it needs to support the whole length of the body. Then and only then can you put the needle in, because if you didn't put the needle in, if you put the needle in before, this little bad boy wouldn't sit through because the ball won't go through the needle. So just push it gently. You don't have to ram it home. Screw this on here. Like I said, this is all finger tight. You shouldn't need any tools. And the protector on the end here. So with that being said, you should have the little needle sticking through. Just to prove a point, I would take the shroud off. So that's pushing through nicely. Alright, so always protect the needle. Leave the shroud on at all times if you can help it. And it works nice and freely. So that's stripping. So always keep this guy clean as possible. Before you paint, run some cleaner through. Now, whatever you guys want to use as cleaner, I mean, water is obviously extremely cheap. It doesn't clean it quite as well as, I mean, you can get like Vallejo cleaners, things like that, certain product cleaners. They always recommend their own brands, obviously, like so Vallejo paint would recommend Vallejo airbrush cleaners. I've got a Badger cleaner here, so airbrush cleaner. I generally use a little bit of proper cleaner, like airbrush cleaner, just before I paint and at the end of the night after I've been painting quite a bit. But in between, you can use anything from, in this bottle here I have some screen wash, because I'm a mechanic and there's a bug falling in my screen wash. Nice. So don't put the bug in for your airbrush. Use the bit of screen wash, bit of water or something. You know, as long as it's clean. You can over clean something at also cost. If you're using airbrush cleaner all the time in between your colours, as soon as you start at the end of the night, all the time, then you know there is the cost. But as long as there's no paint inside here, it doesn't really matter how clean it is. I mean, some people have always said, you know, you can use a little bit of Windolene or something, or a bit of water. It won't harm your airbrush. I mean, the worst thing you can do is put some harsh chemicals like some acids, things like that, or even possibly ultra strong thinners. It will damage the seals, so you have a seal in the tiny little bit there, seal behind there, seal in there, seal in the bowl. So be a bit careful. I mean, we are using acrylics. You know, you can use enamels for an airbrush, that's totally fine, and use a bit of like airbrush thinners, sorry, or even some white spirit. So alright, it's chemical, but it's not too harsh. I wouldn't maybe recommend leaving it with the seals overnight soaking in, because you could dry out the seals. If you think your seals inside your airbrush are ever getting a bit dry, you can always try a tiny little bit of red rubber grease, or you know, maybe a tiny bit of olive oil just to soften the seals. But yeah, you can use pretty much any cleaner you want, as long as it's not too harsh and will damage the seals. As long as it's free of paint. And then with the cleaner, you'll just blast it through the airbrush. Now airbrushing, it doesn't go too much in the atmosphere. I mean, if you have a little spray booth, brilliant. You can have little spray pots that you can just connect to your airbrush, blast through so it doesn't go up in the atmosphere. Hell, you can even use an old, you know, pot, spray in there, just so it's not going in the air, you're not breathing it in too much. You could always use a face mask. You know, I don't recommend painting right next to your nose or anything like that, but you know, you will inhale a little bit of the stuff. So possibly use a mask. I personally don't, which is a bit silly, but then I don't spray that much. I may spray of an evening, possibly an hour. You know, it's not an overly confined room, it's a fair big room, windows generally open. But that's it. I mean, if you are spraying for about 10 minutes and you want to change a colour, just make sure the bowl's nice and clean. So use a earbud or something with your cleaner, clean it out, blast on a bit of paper or tissue or something just to make sure the colours ran through. So using black and then you go to white, you don't want to mix it, you know, then you might want to clean it out fairly heftily. But as long as there's no paint in the end there, no paint on the needle itself, no paint in the bowl, just keep on trucking. As soon as you start getting the paint in there, you know, start drying, crusting up or on the nib, then ditch whatever paint you've got in there and keep it to one side. And then you don't have to strip it to the extent I did. You can just remove the bowl or just maybe take the needle out. Just clean it in here. But generally, just to keep it at bay between the colours, just run a bit of cleaner through just in case, because you never know. But like I said, the more you use it, the more you understand that, oh wait a minute, that's not spraying right, you know, so it must be a blockage, or like I said, if it's bubbling in there. So just pour a little bit of cleaner in there. So I will use, minus the bug, a little bit of screen wash there, and I'll just blast it through, not a problem. So I will hook up the compressor a minute. So it's going to get a little bit noisy for a second, just to show you what I mean. It's nice and simple, screw it in there. Right, compressor is on. So like I said, just pour a little drop in there, and I'll blast it through. As an example, I'm going to be using this bottle. So I can see there's a cone there, nice and clean cone. It's disappearing, not a problem. If you start putting cleaner in there and it's really not dropping down, you have got a hefty blockage. So rather than just blasting it through, this is the quick clean, rather than blasting it through and it's not dropping, then you need to strip it apart, take that needle out and see what's going on. You might find you have to strip the whole thing down like I've just showed you this evening. But generally speaking, in between colours, or if you think it's dry, just put a little bit cleaner in, drops away like that. You shouldn't have to strip it down, you shouldn't have to take the needle out. And that is basics of keeping your airbrush clean. But just get to know your airbrush. Obviously they all vary, but strip it down, preferably over a white piece of card or something, so if any bits go missing, they shouldn't be too far away. I generally don't strip them down over a drain or a sink or anything when I am cleaning, because I am often scared that the bits are going to disappear, especially that little brass conical piece there. But like Iwata, Badger, companies like that, if you do bend the needle over the years or you do break anything, the parts are quite readily available online. They're not too expensive if you buy individual pieces. I know it's dollars, not pounds, but I think the shroud alone, for example, is $16, so it's not mega money. So that's the basics of cleaning and stripping an airbrush. Okay, just one more thing. I did say I was going to show you this. So this is a TP, which is a terrible name if you ask me, but it's one of these dentist really soft cleaning devices to get between the gaps in your teeth. Now, like I said, the cone there, if there's any paint around, it's priority that you clean that out. So that should be clean all the time. So this is really soft. You can see it coming out the other side. Really soft, not invasive. You know, you're not going to damage that. If you start scraping inside there, your paint's not going to flow as well as you like. So yeah, just keep it nice and clean like that. Not a problem. So I keep that in my hobby room because, you know, I really got one for my teeth. I want to keep them separate. So that's the most important piece. Keep that nice, clean and free of paint at all times. Right, thank you very much for watching. Cheers.